Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. I am Taylor Ragland. I do sports for Allen, Plano, and Lake Cities. I'm definitely not Matt Welch, who is on vacation this week, so I'll be doing the there you go. I'll be doing the hosting duties for today's podcast as well as Thursdays, and I'll be joined both days by Justin Thomas, who does sports for Flower Mound, Louisville, the Colony, Carrollton, Coppell. Is that right? Sweet. And by Brian Murphy, who does sports for Frisco, Prosper, Little Elm, and Salina. Yeah. So today we'll be talking about District 4-5A football, continuing our podcast discussions on local districts and teams we cover. And this district in particular is only, as far as we're concerned, the Carrollton schools are the only schools that we cover specifically. Yep. So Carrollton Newman Smith, Carrollton R.L. Turner, and Carrollton Creekview. And they'll be joined in 4-5A by Denton Ryan, Denton, Colleyville Heritage, Grapevine, North Richland Hills, Birdville. So that's the district that they find themselves in, and we'll turn to our resident Carrollton expert, I guess, to kind of lead things off. So what do you see from those three teams, and how do you figure they're going to fare as they enter this new alignment?
Well, unfortunately, I think they're going to have a tough go. You know, they Creekview, Turner, and Smith didn't have the best of showings in 14-5A the past couple years. You know, those three teams occupied the 6, 7, and 8 spots both times. So finished towards the bottom. You know, they had been lumped in with some Dallas schools in the past where they were competitive. Actually, you know, prior to 14-5A, you know, Creekview had even won a couple district titles, but didn't go too well in 14-5A. And I mean, this district is beast. This new one.
Now, Justin, would you say this District 4-5A is tougher than 14-5A, like from head to toe?
From last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. I would think so. I mean, you have a Denton Ryan team that, okay, just look at the 5 teams, not counting the Carrollton schools. Ryan made the state semifinals. Colleyville made the 3rd round. And then Grapevine and Birdville both made the 2nd round. And one of them only lost in the 2nd round because they lost to Ryan. And then you even have a Denton team that, while they went 3-7 last year, you know, they were a 9-2 team 2 years ago. So, you know, they've been a playoff team with a strong regular season recently too. So from my perspective, yeah, I think this district is even tougher for them.
I think it's an interesting district in that it seems one of the more clear cut, at least as far as the division between the 4 playoff teams and the 4 non-playoff teams. There's a little bit of maybe a bubble existing between Birdville and Denton. Like you said, Denton down a couple years, but a program that has a lot of maturity and age and veteran presence. So who knows? Maybe they could jump up, I guess, and take the 4 spot. But
when you're just comparing districts, if you're looking at a team like Denton, that's, you know, projecting them out as the 5th team, you know, they actually have more returning startars than any other team in the district.
I saw there's like 17.
I think 17,
But so, you know, they've had a 9-win season just 2 years ago, kind of took a step back next year, but maybe they're ready to kind of move forward again with all those players.
It still seems a little bit like, though, that it's going to be some form of, you know, Colleyville Heritage, Denton Ryan, Grapevine, and probably Birdville, I guess, with Birdville being that team that maybe Denton could leap, but still one of those districts where, you know, heading into it, you know, basically everyone is predicting that, you know, here are the 4 playoff teams. It's just a matter of how they finish, and in some cases maybe even not that, because it seems like Colleyville Heritage and Denton Ryan have kind of gathered a consensus as the top 2 teams. But it's definitely a clear-cut line with, as you said, unfortunately for our listeners in Carrollton, all 3 of those teams likely on the wrong side of that line. So I guess we can start with Newman Smith. Just any notes you have about the Trojans, and it seems like the consensus is, although all Carrollton schools will likely finish outside the playoffs, and that's kind of the feeling that most people have looking at the district, Newman Smith is maybe the one that could jump up and win a couple games, play spoiler, or maybe even, you know, surprise some people. I don't know all the way into the playoffs or not, but maybe has the best chance and are being kind of predicted to at least lead the pack out of Carrollton.
They did have this stronger year of the 3 schools last year. They went 2-8, and their 2 wins were against their district or their city rivals, I guess you would say.
What's that with, you know, the Carrollton Farmers Branch title? What's it called?
Well, they have I don't think they have a title for the actual city, but like the big game is the Turner-Smith game, and they call that the Battle for Josie Lane. But I don't think there's an actual like city championship title or anything like that. But if there was, it would have gone to Smith last year. They beat Creekview 20-7 and Turner 40-30. So they were the unofficial city champions. Talking to Coach Paul Ressa this spring, he was pretty excited because, one of the issues for some of these Carrollton schools is just, getting the numbers out there, getting the depth, and he felt like participation in the spring was really on an uptick. He liked what he saw work ethic-wise, so I think depth-wise they should be better. I think they have better numbers, a little deeper team, so I think that's something that should help them. And they've also made some stylistic changes. They've moved to an even man front on the defensive line there to try to overcome some of those depth issues and get more people in the spots where they need to be. This is a team that's really relied on two-way players a lot over the past, and I think they're going to try to limit that some. Not to say that they don't still have some awesome two-way players like Jalen Hughes and Jacoby Johnson, the running back / defensive back tandems.
Right.
Both of them are strong players, so they should be good at running back. They lose their quarterback, John Mark Lamb. He was a 2-year starter. So they're going to look to either senior Dane McMahon or it could be freshman Cameron Beard. Those are the two guys that, at least when talking to Coach Ressa over the spring, those were the two guys they were anticipating kind of battling for that quarterback job this fall.
You said freshman? Where did he come
Beard
from?
is just, I guess, up from 8th grade. I don't know. I guess
just killing the middle school circuit?
Middle school scene, and ready to go here. So so those two are expected to kind of battle it out, and then they do have a nice playmaker at wide receiver in Marshall Funches. He was the district's offensive newcomer of the year last year. So, and then another kind of player to kind of keep a lookout for at Newman Smith is Christian McGee. He's a basketball player, but he's going to come over and play football this year, and Coach Ressa thinks he's going to bring some nice things to the receiver position.
Athletes can't hurt, for sure.
And then I would say kind of maybe the strength of the team is probably in the secondary. We mentioned Jalen Hughes and Johnson, and then Terrell Chapman and Al-Jalil Hassan. I hope I'm saying that right. Al-Jalil Hassan. But so between those four guys, a lot of experience and a lot of talent in the secondary. So, and that's when you look at this district and some of the teams and what they're bringing back.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of firepower in this district offensively, so good secondary is something that could go a long way for the Trojans.
So if you're going to give Newman Smith the unofficial Carrollton ISD title already, we'll see how it plays out, but predicted to be the best of the three. How do you see the other two, kind of the battle between R.L. Turner and Creekview shaking out?
They were the champions last year. We'll wait till after a break here before we crown them again, as Danny Green once said. But Turner is in a little different boat. They have a new head coach, Isaiah Young. He was the defensive coordinator there, but he's moving to head coach because former head coach Michael Ramirez is now in the athletic department, an AD in the athletic department there at CFB. So he gets a promotion. Isaiah Young then gets a promotion from defensive coordinator to head coach, and he's taken over a team. They went 1-9 last year. They, as I said, they obviously lost to Newman Smith, but they did beat Creekview 28-27. So that was where their one victory came from. Turner, they got 12 guys back, or projected to have 12 guys back, 6 on each side of the ball. So some pieces to work with there. Connor Holtman is one of the key guys back at quarterback. He played kind of, I would say maybe like 2/3 of the year last year down the stretch. Was effective moving the ball. He had 800 passing yards and 4 touchdowns, but obviously needs to work on taking care of the ball a little more with those 9 interceptions that he had. And he's got some weapons, though. Stephen Rico is a multi-year starter on the offensive line, and then Bryson Looney had 600 yards and 4 touchdowns, kind of splitting carries last year, so he could be in line for a bigger kind of workload this year. And then wide receiver Kyrese Williams was one of the few all-district selections offensively for Turner last year, so he'll be back as a senior this year, or at least expected to be. And then I would say kind of their standout player defensively is Daniel Saldana. He was a defensive lineman, and he was an all-district selection last year as well, too. So he'll be back kind of anchoring that defense for new coach Isaiah Young, who obviously has a defensive mindset after being the coordinator there. So
Right. I guess moving into the last of the three in Creekview, who, as you kind of already alluded to, got the worst of both its Carrollton partners last season. So what do you see out of the Mustangs?
Payback after Creekview had kind of been the top team for a little while there, but really hurt by injuries. They were really banged up last year. This year, they should be a little deeper and hopefully much healthier. And kind of like Denton, this is a team that has a lot of talent back. They have 8 guys back on each side of the ball. Unfortunately, they do lose both of their top 2 runners, and when you're a flexbone rushing team, it's big holes to fill. So they'll have to find. They're going to look to a committee to try to replace Jared Hall and Markel Phillips. This is a team that only threw 30 passes all of last season.
Oh wow!
So
you don't see that very much.
No,
anymore.
yeah.
I know Frisco does that. They still have the wing tee.
Yeah,
it's so crazy. They run the ball, 50 times a game or close to it.
They switched to that last year, and especially with those running backs they had, but just so beat up injury-wise. They lost their quarterback, offensive lineman, so hopefully healthy, and that'll get the running game going. And they do have, as I said, Donovan Bakar. He was supposed to be the quarterback last year, or expected to be, and didn't even play at all because of injury. So hopefully he's all healthy and ready to go. And
now, was that more like a scheme thing where they ran the ball so much, or they had the personnel?
No,
that's just what the coach liked?
Switched to the flexbone last year, and that's what they're rolling with. So yeah, it was a total scheme change, and so yeah, like I said, only 30 passes all last year.
That's crazy.
I think the strength for Creekview is going to be their defense, and that starts with Luke McPherson. He's a first-team All-Districter on the defensive front, and then Aaron Cyrus and Bradley Lockett were both All-District guys in the secondary last year. So some talent back there, like I said, 8 guys on each side of the ball, so that continuity should help them, and I'm looking for a better year from Creekview this year.
Right. I guess from the Carrollton schools, we'll move to the 5 other programs and touch briefly on each one of those. We don't cover any of them specifically, but familiar with them obviously, and will become even more so now that they square off with the Carrollton schools. So I think the consensus seems to be that Denton Ryan and Colleyville Heritage will definitely duke it out for the district title.
I think I even saw when doing some research and looking at some other publications and stuff, one publication, Dave Campbell, I believe, had those 2 teams actually playing for the regional championship.
Yeah,
so not only contending for this district title, but teams think these are 2 teams that could make really deep playoff runs.
Right. Yeah, and Ryan specifically, maybe on the strength of they returned 10 starters, state semifinalists last season, as you kind of touched on earlier, I believe. But the big question mark for them, I think, is obviously they're going to have to break in a new signal caller. I don't know if they decided exactly, who that's going to be yet. Obviously, since we don't cover them directly, we're not in constant contact or anything like that. But it'll have to be somebody as they lose their signal caller from last year, and we'll have to break somebody else in. But it is easier to do that when that new quarterback will be surrounded by some pretty impressive skill position players. So they have Amani Bailey, I believe is how you say his name, Jamarian Robertson, Billy Bowman. There's a ton of skill position players at obviously the skill positions, like running back, wide receiver, that when a new quarterback has to come in and get used to a system and break himself in and play at the varsity level, it obviously is going to help a lot when the experience is there, the talent's there. You have guys that can go up and get balls. You have guys that can get separation and make themselves a little more open for a new quarterback. Guys that you can hand the ball off to and not take a play off, but catch your breath and know that, okay, it's 3rd and 4. I don't have to be, in my first year as a varsity quarterback, I don't have to be the guy all the time that's going to carry the load. So I think that it's kind of it's a question mark, but also one that could be not easy for them to answer, but easier certainly because of the personnel that they have coming back for sure.
And I know, Brian, you kind of mentioned you got to cover these teams a few years back when you were back at UNT, and I'm sure, as you know, this is a team that you don't really have to look at who's back. You just kind of take for granted that they're going to rebuild pretty quickly there.
Right.
I'm like, like you look, they've only lost 3 games in the last 3 seasons. Spencer Sanders, I got to see him play last year against Lone Star, one of the best games, a 28-21 win for Denton Ryan. You had MJ Rivers against Spencer Sanders. I saw a lot of good quarterbacks last year, but Spencer Sanders was by far the best quarterback I've probably ever seen. And that dating back to Gerard Hurd days at Denton Geyer, I got to see him play, in the early 2010s, but dude, Spencer Sanders was phenomenal. He's at Oklahoma State now. It's big shoes to fill there, quarterback.
Did you recall those skill guys kind of standing out when you were watching that game? There
was a guy, I'm pretty sure he was a senior, Toski Dove, something like that. He had an interesting name. He was his, like 6'3", threat receiver. He was awesome, but I think he's gone. So.
Yeah, well, like you said, I know Robertson and Bowman have pretty big numbers last year as well, and I mean, obviously, when you have a guy like Sanders, everybody's going to have some big numbers.
Right. But I guess moving from Denton Ryan now to kind of, like we said, the consensus challenger, I guess, or the 1A and 1B team and Colleyville Heritage. A different situation for sure in that they have a quarterback in Drew Sanders who also plays linebacker.
The new Sanders, yeah.
Which is a really, it's a strange thing, even in high school football, to run your quarterback out on defense, especially in a really physical position like linebacker. So, I mean, that says a lot about, the physicality and the size and the kind of player that they have in Drew Sanders. And then they also have Texas A&M commit Cam Brown, who's also very versatile and I think can basically play all over the field. So regional semifinalist last year.
Plays all over the field, but he is an all-stater at receiver after that 19 touchdown season last year.
So kind of the opposite situation, I guess, for them, in that they bring weapons back and they bring a lot of continuity back from, like I said, a season where they made the regional semifinals. So we'll get into our predictions for the district after we take a break, but it seems like those two teams are kind of the general idea and the general consensus for 1 and 2.
Is that the same Drew Sanders from Lake Dallas? Did he transfer from Lake Dallas? Because there was a Drew Sanders.
I don't know for sure, actually.
He's a big 6'5" quarterback.
I don't think this guy's 6'5", maybe? I mean, he's a big physical kid, but I don't know if he's 6'5". Maybe he is.
6'5", 210.
That might be him then, as far as I know. 40. I mean, I do know that he's an athlete.
I remember 2 years ago he was a freshman and he was plugged in at Lake Dallas. Yeah. And I thought I heard something about him transferring. I mean,
could be, man. Yeah. Could be, yeah. I mean, that was obviously before my time. But
I don't really cover Lake Dallas either.
I mean, it could be, and it would certainly make sense for if he felt like he could get a better opportunity. Lake Dallas obviously has Ryan Depper-Smith, who's kind of been painted as a starter there.
I thought I heard something like a year ago about Drew Sanders not being at Lake Dallas anymore, because I was like, Depper-Smith's the quarterback, and Drew Sanders was awesome as a freshman.
But we might have some news here as I'm trying to look up this information, and I see that 4-star quarterback Drew Sanders, who's with Colleyville Heritage, is following his father Mitch to Denton Ryan.
Oh no!
This was as of June 26th, so I guess
that would be something.
Yeah.
Well, interesting.
Okay, well that changes
the entire podcast.
That changes everything, and I think that slides it even more. If we were already looking at Denton Ryan as the district winner, I think that if that's true, that slides it even more in their favor, because you have a question at quarterback, and you're going to bring in the huge 6'5" athlete, then
4'5", 40.
He did start at Lake Dallas too, by the way.
Okay, I was like, I can't.
Well, that makes
Sanders that are 6'5".
Way to send us on that thread, so we can
there you go. Okay, well,
total idiots now.
Breaking news. So, like we said, obviously don't cover these teams day to day, but if that's true, that's huge news for Denton Ryan, and like I said, probably solidifies them as the class of the district. For sure.
That's a game changer.
I guess
good shoes to fill for Spencer Sanders then, with a 4-star recruit. Just plug him right in.
So Sanders to Sanders, huh?
I didn't even put that together.
I guess briefly then, before we take our break, we will look at the other schools in Birdville and Grapevine. And Denton, we talked about Denton a little bit. I think basically the storyline with Denton is mature 17 starters back. But we'll take a big jump, I guess, from them to move into the playoff scene, because 3-7 last year, 1-5 in their district, moving into a district that like we said is tough. It's going to be tough to crack the playoff bubble. So definitely have to lean on that depth and that experience. It's going to be tough, but I kind of have them penciled in as the 5th team tentatively. So we'll see if they can make that jump and leapfrog Birdville.
I think Birdville and Grapevine, you have a couple of teams that are kind of similar to Ryan, but not on the same level. As we're really loaded at the skill position, unless they have some players coming in that are like all-state players that we don't know about.
More breaking news on the
right.
But both teams seem to have need to do a little rebuilding on the offensive line, but if they can do that, both teams are really stocked at the skill positions. Stone Early at quarterback for Birdville, and then running back Ladarius Mixon had 23 touchdowns last year. And then you look over at Grapevine, you have a guy like David Clayton who had 17 receiving touchdowns, and then you have a running back, Rashawn Prayer, who had 2,000 total yards and 19 touchdowns. So, like I said earlier, there's just some big-time offensive ability in this district.
Well, I think at Grapevine, too, you have a backup quarterback in Cade Rhodes who saw some time last year, I believe, if I'm correct.
I think
so definitely has been groomed to take over the position and is familiar with the program, and that obviously makes it a little easier when you're trying to break in a new starter when they've been there, they've worked with the guys that are coming back and all that good stuff. So that's just a brief look look at all the teams in the district, including the ones that we cover in Carrollton. When we come back on the other side of the break, we're going to take a look at our predicted standings, maybe a couple games to watch in the district, and just finish up our conversation about 4-5A. So we'll catch you right after a message from the sponsor.
Today's Student Athlete Spotlight is brought to you by Bavarian Grill, authentic Bavarian food and beer garden. Listed by the Zagat survey as the highest rated German restaurant in Texas for 12 years in a row. 12 years! That's 3 presidential terms. You can enjoy traditional and authentic spring favorites now. Everything from appetizers like slow roasted ham hock and potato pancakes to entrees like bratwurst or breaded schnitzel. Bring your whole family for lunch and dinner. They are open Tuesday through Saturday, located off Parker and Highway 75 in Plano. Bavarian Grill. And now, let's get back to the podcast.
Welcome back to the Starlock Media High School Sports Podcast. We're going to continue our discussion here with 4-5A Division I football. We've already taken a brief look at the teams in the district, especially our Carrollton schools, Newman Smith, Turner, and Creekview. Now we're going to take a crack at our potential district standings and how we think it's going to shake out, as well as some games to watch, I guess, as the play in District 4-5A progresses throughout the season and playoff spots shake out. So whoever wants to start, let's I guess start with some games to watch, and we'll finish up with our overall predictions. So JT, what's kind of one of your games to watch in the league?
Well, obviously all the inner city battles between the CFB schools there are always fun, even when there's maybe not necessarily a lot on the line, and you kind of saw that last year with the competition you saw, especially in the Smith games against Turner and Creekview. So those are the first ones that jump out to me. You know, the Battle of Josie Lane is always a fun one there between Turner and Smith, and never really a true home field advantage, you know, with all of them sharing Standard Stadium. So
Standard Stadium is a nice stadium.
Yeah, it's a great stadium. One of my favorite stadiums to cover a game at, especially if you like food. They have one of the best spreads in the press box there, but always looking forward to those battles. And like I said, I don't see a whole lot separating these teams, so I think they should be pretty tightly contested games, all 3 of the CFB games there.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a badge of honor or a badge of pride, I guess, when you come out on top of if you're not going to make the postseason, if you're not going to have a postseason run, if you're not even going to be very good, at the very least you could be the best team in your city and have bragging rights over people you grew up with and people you used to play with or whatever the case may be. So in a lot of districts, I feel like that's kind of the case. You look at the district with Salina and Melissa, and it has the 2 Paris schools that aren't necessarily great, but when they play each other, it's going to be a dogfight, and it's going to be fun.
That'll be their Super Bowl, pretty much.
Yeah, right. That'll be the game. Whether or not they make the playoffs, they can hang their hat on. Well, at least we took down our crosstown rival. So, Brian, what about you?
Real quick, just another thing to note on those games too is it's kind of odd this year, just when they're falling in the season. For instance, Creekview, they won't see either of their rivals to the very last 2 games of the year.
Oh wow!
So they get Turner and Smith the last 2 weeks. So if they could get something going,
yeah, you never know.
But yeah, anyway.
Speaking of crosstown rivals, Denton hasn't beaten Ryan since 1999.
Oof.
In this millennium, they have not beaten Ryan. And so you look on paper, you're like, oh, okay, Ryan's been the big brother, dominating the little brother. But, crosstown rivals are always fun. Just like you mentioned with the Carrollton schools, Denton Ryan against Denton, that was always a blast. Yeah. When, like you mentioned earlier how I covered Denton ISD back, 5-6 years ago when I was at UNT up in Denton, they're always fun games. Regardless, if it was a blowout, whatever, it's crosstown rivals are always, they're different than just some teams that aren't familiar with each other. So.
Right.
Yeah, this district doesn't lack for crosstown rivals with Colleyville and Grapevine also getting to go at it. Another 2 teams that share stadiums that'll be squaring off this year.
Now, Birdville's pretty far, right? Yeah,
it's North Richland Hills.
Yeah.
So
okay, so it's kind of in that area.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, that's Colleyville Stadium is configured on 26 there. It's actually not too far from Birdville. That's probably like maybe 15-20 minute drive.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, speaking of Birdville, for me, the game that would be easy to go with is obviously Denton Ryan and Colleyville Heritage, because it could be the battle for the district title. It's the 2 pretty much best teams in the district, so
now it's quarterback versus former team.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of storylines, kind of a Clash of the Titans situation, but I think I'm going to go with Denton and Birdville because we've kind of already alluded to it, but it seems like that's kind of the one playoff bubble that exists in this district is between those 2 teams for who could jump up and take the 4th playoff spot. So that's October 18th, so kind of right in the middle of the season. And I think for Denton especially, as they as they try to kind of come back from some down years, and I think a 1-7 district or season, like I said last year, or maybe 3-7 and 1-5 in district, I think is right. But still a down year. So as they try to kind of leverage all that maturity and that veteran presence that they have into a better year and potentially a return to the postseason, I think that's going to be their first real are we ready to kind of take a little bit of that step? Because I don't think they're going to beat Grapevine. I don't think they're going to beat Colville Heritage, and I really don't think they're going to beat Ryan. As much as a rivalry game can play into emotions and crazy things can happen, I just don't see them realistically beating any of those three teams. But who knows with Birdville? This may be kind of their chance to step up and say, you know what, we're on the way back to being relevant. We're on the way back to getting into the postseason. And if they beat Birdville, that's Birdville. If they win that, they could beat the Carrollton schools. If they sweep through Carrollton, then
4 wins right there.
Then who knows? Maybe they sneak into that 4th playoff spot. So as easy as it is to say, Ryan Heritage is going to be the big game, I think that Denton and Birdville game will go a long way toward determining who that last postseason spot's going to go to. So that's the one that I went with.
You want to just transition into your picks there? It seems
sure,
like a good segue.
Sure, man.
So who's going to win that game? Who's going to get the spot?
Man, I gave it to. I think my picks are literally the same as the order that Dave Campbell's Texas Football had listed, and as much as I went through everything and tried to see if there were some surprises, it just seems like a district where there's just not going to be. I think Denton Ryan is the class of the district. I think they're always good. I think that they're going to continue to be and win the district title. I think Colleyville Heritage, even after a quarterback transfer, just has enough talent to come in second. Grapevine, I think, is pretty clearly the 3rd best team in the district and has some guys coming back with a lot of talent. And then I gave the playoff battle to Birdville, between Birdville and Denton. So my top 4 were Ryan, Heritage, Grapevine, and Birdville, and that's who I think is going to get in the postseason, with Denton right on the outside looking in 5th. Newman Smith, who we have kind of talked about and determined is who we think is probably going to be the best of the Carrollton schools. But again, a toss-up. And I think maybe the one thing that I differ from some people is I have R.L. Turner second to last and Creekview last. I think that sometimes when you get a new coach and somebody gets elevated like that, and it can kind of change the attitude of the program. I think they have some young talent. And I think just, sometimes when you go in a new direction, some fun things can happen. So, and it's not like, that Creekview's a huge tall task. So I think that between those two schools, maybe Turner shows up and gets some emotion from having a new coach and wanting to kind of have a better year and gets the best of that game. So R.L. Turner in 7th and then Creekview 8th. But like I said at the top of the podcast, I think this is a district where the postseason teams are pretty clear-cut. It should be, at least, barring any major surprises or major injuries. Obviously, that can always throw things into chaos a little bit. But for me, Ryan, Heritage, Grapevine, Birdville are your top 4, followed by Denton, Newman Smith, Turner, and Creekview.
I wouldn't be too shocked if Colleyville Heritage drops to the 3rd spot.
Thinking about now with that quarterback transferring out, that's probably the one, because with him there,
already liking kind of how this Grapevine team was kind of shaping up with the skill guys.
With him at Heritage, I could have seen them and Ryan being a lot closer. But now, who knows what kind of impact that absence could have, and Grapevine bringing back the majority of their skill positions on offense. So that could easily be probably the one, I'd say, between Birdville and Denton and Heritage and Grapevine, the two that may switch. But without knowing a lot about those teams and just kind of looking back at past success and what they have coming back, just kind of going with not the safe route, but the kind of the assumed way that it's going to play out for now, barring anything crazy. So
I'd almost go on a limb saying that Denton is going to get the 4th spot. They have 17 guys coming back. You can't beat experience. And they're just a year away removed from going 9-2. The year before that, they're 8-3. The year before that, they're 8-4. So last year was kind of, maybe a down year, but they have all that experience coming back. So I think Denton beats Birdville for that 4th spot and makes the playoffs.
Okay, I'm actually gonna, not knowing what they have waiting in the wings with this transfer, I'm bouncing Colleyville all the way out. Yeah, I'm gonna take Ryan 1st, Grapevine 2nd, Birdville 3rd, Denton 4th.
Wow.
Colleyville 5th. And then we're going to round it out with the Carrollton schools. Smith 6th, Creekview 7th, and Turner 8th.
So who were your 4 playoff teams, Ryan?
Denton Ryan.
Right.
Colleyville Heritage, maybe slipping down to 3, but safe bet 2. Grapevine 3. and the Broncos 4 at Denton.
All right. Well, you all got
You got
any?
Birdville out.
Birdville's out. They can fly on out of
I
here.
got Colleyville out, and you got Denton out.
I have Denton out. Yeah, with kind of like a literally 4A 4B situation, but we'll see. I guess we'll.
The hot take.
Yeah, man, hot take. I guess we'll look back on this. We'll look back on this in 4 or 5 months and either call him a genius, Nostradamus, or just tell him exactly how ridiculous, how ridiculous he was.
Best backup quarterback in the world, waiting, is about to be the district MVP.
And one last thing I wanted to mention earlier when y'all were talking about how the Carrollton schools were with the Dallas schools a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I wish I would have seen Carrollton go in District 6 5A. Because you're looking at that, it's, Mansfield Timberview, Mansfield Legacy, Lancaster, Highland Park, and then the 4 Dallas schools.
Yeah.
Wilson, Sunset, Samuel, and Adams. Flip the 3 Carrollton schools with the 2 Mansfields and then the Highland Park, and then have them duke it out in 4 5A and have,
Yeah, but that's what a district that would be. Awesome. The Mansfield schools and Lancaster with Denton, Ryan, and Colleyville.
That'd be
and
so
Grapevine.
awesome.
That's like too good, man.
That'd be crazy. That'd be like playing the playoffs.
You probably have 4 teams that shouldn't make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Make the playoffs.
Yeah.
But,
That would be a monster district, though.
All right. Well, I guess that will wrap up our discussion of 4-5A Division I football. That'll do it for this Monday edition of the Star Oak Media High School Sports Podcast. We'll be back on Thursday with the same cast of characters, I believe. I'll host once again, and I'll be joined by Brian and Justin once again. So we'll be talking, I believe, 5-5A Division I football. So you can look out for that on Thursday. We hope to see you then. Until then, have a good beginning to your week, and we'll talk to you soon.